Yes. Oh, you know what that sound means. It's time for In the Paddock F1 Season 4. How about them apples? And we're coming into the 2024 season of the F1 calendars here. 3 days of testing in Bahrain. We got your info on that. Let's kick those tires and light those fires, Big Daddy. We're caffeinated, we're medicated, Greeny. Good day, sir.
Good day, and of course, shout out to all our U.S. servicemen and women tuning in from around the world. Shout out to everyone who is tuning in. We could not do this show without you. We just came off our biggest month ever in January, followed by our biggest month ever this month in February. We keep growing, and we could not do this without you listening here in the U.S. and all over the world. It's been fantastic hearing from people. We've definitely stepped up our YouTube game a little bit in the last month here. So thank you all for checking that out. If you haven't checked it out, jump on YouTube, go to Greeny and the Cheese, subscribe. We're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers by, let's say, by Monaco. Get to 1,000 by Monaco. That's the plan. In the Paddock F1 Greeny and the Cheese, we are back season 4, believe it or not. They let us on the air. They let us do this podcast for that long. Hopefully season 4 will be our biggest year ever. And again, we could not get here without you guys. So testing. And away we go. We had 3 days of testing this week. Some interesting stuff going on. I think overall the consensus, and I'm going to give you my overall consensus before I turn it back to you, which was the cars looked a lot better this year overall, I believe, than in 2023. We didn't have like the undulation problems and all of those problems. Nobody was breaking their neck in these cars. There was no one sitting there getting iced down on their back. When it was really, I think, a solid week of testing. We had that drain issue popping out a couple times. We had the red flag on day 2 of testing. But with all of that, it seemed like a pretty successful week. It seems that the last couple years, 22 to 23 and 23 here to 24, have been more and more successful. The vehicles really look like they're evening out. Even though Red Bull's way ahead, there's no one that's really massively, we don't see the massive chasm at this point. Ferrari looked really, really good. I'm going to let you talk about that in a moment. So did McLaren, so did Mercedes, and Haas looked terrible. So with all of that, the 2024 season has begun. And before I get to that, don't forget, we're going to put a special episode out this week. We have 1 week from today. The season begins. But we're going to put a special episode out with all of our picks for the year, just like we do every year. We're going to picks and awards and whatever the heck. And of course, Greeny Bucks will begin tonight, right now on this show. First episode of Greeny Bucks. First time ever. Preseason Greeny Bucks going down. And some other announcements to make. Cheese, I'm turning it over to you. How do you feel about testing?
I totally agree with what you said there. Everybody all the cars looked more stable than they did the prior year at this time. Everybody definitely increased their downforce. Drivers are taking more curbs, and the cars weren't getting really unsettled. So that's something to look out for the season. Probably why those drainage gates the drainage covers were popping up, because they were going a lot further out than they had been the last few years. So everybody was definitely more stable. Haas was utter trash, as you said. They delayed their 2024 design by throwing those late upgrades on, which, made the car worse. So kudos to Haas.
Nice job. I.O.
Yep, we got we got somebody new in there. So, but yeah, that's they're pretty much going to be
Haas. We don't need to talk about Haas, and that's coming from me.
They're just rubbish. We can move on to was it Kick now, because they keep changing names. Look more stable. They usually run light on fuel. That's why the glory runs there on the end of the third day. Looks like they probably had lacked some downforce, or something's just not. The performance isn't there for them. Williams looked good in a straight line, as they have been last few years, but looked very sensitive to the wind when the wind kicked up on day 2. Unstable in the rear, which has been a problem they've had for the last few years. So they'll have to address that, and to be able to challenge anybody in the midfield. Alpine kind of looked about the same as last year, to be honest. Didn't look like the car progressed a whole lot. They're going to need a lot of development. They ran the car heavy too, pretty much the entire 3 days. So, car running lighter might be could be one of those quick quality car, or better quality and crappy race performance. That's what it kind of looked like for me for Alpine. So they're going to need definitely a lot of performance upgrades. Visa Cash App RB, whatever the hell you want to call them. They got the RB19, and they're getting Red Bull components. Definitely going to challenge that midfield this year instead of being at the back like they did last year.
Yeah, let me stop you right there because I just went quickly through the back five of the pack and the back half of the field would have seemed right there between Haas, Williams, Sauber, Kick, and whatever the heck that is. I don't. So Kick is that's Ed Craven's other company besides Stake. He also owns Stake, and he owns Kick. KICK, which is like the new, I guess he's trying to make it the new Twitch. That's what it is. It's an absolute disaster, by the way. It's a disgraceful disaster for those of you who know that like online streaming platforming world. Kick is an absolute disaster. You can look in that. I'm sure at some point this season I may at this point, and I've done a ton of research. I know we talked about it before. Do that episode about Ed Craven and Kick and the disaster that's going on there. You have no idea. Just go to YouTube and type in Ed Craven and it's wild. It's wild. But it's only going to, I think, for Formula One's sake, it's only going to be a 2-year thing until Audi takes over this team. But if they last that long, I don't think so. They're actually going to last
Probably
that
not
long in that position because the whole thing seems like an FTX disaster. And then, of course, you have the VCAP, VCRAP, whatever that other, is there. Whatever the other
Red Bull Juniors.
Red Bull Juniors. And, of course, Alpine, which, is questionably right in the middle there, probably with Williams as well. You could probably add them into that 5 or that 6, 7 spots there. The one thing I do want to say about the Visa Cash App car is that, like, while the suspension and gearbox really, really seem not just similar, but almost identical to the RB19, it seems that the aerodynamics are completely different based on testing this week between the RB19 and this Visa Cash App car. So I don't see, as we were talking about maybe a few weeks ago, that this Visa Cash App car could compete for a top 5 spot. I don't think. I think they're definitely going to be in that back 4. I think you might agree as well. And unless Alpine has a disaster, I think Alpine's going to be in that.
They'll be challenging
in that 5-6 spot.
Top 5. Yeah.
I think
for sure.
Williams and Alpine should be in that 5-6 spot this year.
No,
which we didn't.
No. Down. Further down. Yeah,
this is down for Alpine.
Visa Cash App is going to be the top of that bunch, 100%. They have way more backing now. They're using the same facilities as Red Bull. The car's going to progress. They're going to be in that fight for that 5th spot for sure.
So if you got to rank it the bottom 5 right now, rank them 6 to 10. Go.
Probably RB, Alpine, Williams, Stake, and Haas.
Ooh, Williams taking a step back this year. Potential.
Yeah, the car, the rear didn't address the rear enough. The rear still very unstable. And then with the wins you get in Bahrain, which, do kick up there, the car struggled. The car was struggling. They're very, very susceptible to wind. And the rear's just not that stable. And, when your rear's not stable, you're going to be chewing up tires and having to pit earlier. And it's, they're going to be about the same spot. The car progressed, still good in a straight line. So some tracks like, your Monzas and Spas and stuff like that, probably, Albon will probably throw it up there near the front, but he'll probably end up dropping back just because of the race pace. And, if your rear's unstable, you're going to be chewing up those rears. Bottom line. And you're going to have to pit earlier than everybody else. So they're going to struggle with that until that's addressed, which has been a problem they've had for the last 2-3 years, to be honest.
Yeah.
So that's a problem they have to address. I mean, they've had the straight line speed. They just can't get the rear settled. That's what made, you got to have your rear settled. That gives you traction. Stop you from chewing up your tires. It's a big thing, and they just haven't addressed it, which I thought they were going to. I thought that was going to be one of their main points, but they did not.
I want to make two big points about the bottom 5 before we move to the top 5, which probably way more interesting, is number 1 on Haas. Haas has to stop faking it. They have to stop putting out these fake quality paces that they have. The qualifying does not matter. You are a disaster. Be who you are. Stop running to qualify and start running for race day and not you want to race on Sunday, not Saturday. Okay, so I think the one thing hopefully Ayo Komatsu fixes is this reality. If you're gonna stink on Sunday, then just stink on Saturday. Be where you need to be. Don't try to go for a top 10 where you know on Sunday you have no chance of staying in the top 10. Stop trying to get to Q3. Stop. Your goal is not to get to Q3. Your goal is to score points. All right? And I know you could say Q3 means that you're going to get points. It doesn't, and it hasn't. All right? So stop. Don't be just a sprint race point scoring team, which you're probably going to be this year. Hopefully next year they can take a step if they even exist next year. The other point with Williams, I believe in James Vowles. I do. I think he can really step it up. I think this team could step it up. I think Williams could end up with that 6th spot this year. But we'll see. So let's get to the more important part, the top 5. Now, I can't imagine anyone besides Red Bull in your number 1 or anyone's number 1 this year, unless you were watching a different testing, which is possible as well. People like to live in their silos. But as far as this is concerned, even you being the biggest Ferrari fan that there is, the Tifosi.
I wouldn't go that far, but
the Tifosi, even the biggest fans of Ferrari, I don't believe that they can win it this year. So let's move on from Red Bull. We've talked enough about Red Bull every week, and we will talk about Red Bull every single week ad nauseum this season. So let's get through 2 through 5. Where do you got them ranked? Give me number 5 after test.
5, I'm going to go with Aston. The car looked good, to be dead honest. The car looked really good. Looked very much improved. Really good traction out of the corners, good handling. Alonso's had really strong race pace on their long runs. We'll see about the high-speed corners. That's kind of where the car struggled a bit last year. So we'll see when we get to some other racetracks with the high-speed cornering, see if the car's improved there. But the car looked improved, but, they'll be in that fight. They'll be in that fight for a top 4 spot. This even led Stroll to, not hurt himself and improve himself to give, Alonso a better pairing and score more points that way. But the car definitely looked very much improved.
Well,
good development on this. What's that?
I was saying, hopefully Lance Stroll can care and put a full season together instead of like, I'm going to race the first couple races and I'm going to show up the last couple races, but in the middle, who cares? And it's really, really tough. He looks a mess, by the way. I don't know. He looks like he looked like a mess in testing. I don't know if he was high or something. He definitely looked like his hair's all over the place. I don't know. He looks like a washed up YouTube star or something like that. He does not look like a professional racer. He does not. And I'm a little bit worried about Aston Martin and overall between both drivers, because you got an aging driver and you got one that doesn't look like he cares. And we got a lot of those vibes last year with Lance Stroll not caring. But yeah, I agree with Aston Martin in number 5th spot. So that gives us number 4, which can go in any direction here with the last 3 teams. Who do you got number 4?
I'm going to put McLaren.
Fair.
I'm going to put McLaren. And I'm going to give you reasons why. The car looks stable. They didn't have a long race run. So, and then they ran, I think, 20 laps or so, the final session on Friday. I mean, that's very light when everybody else is throwing down, 70 plus laps. So is there a reliability concern there? Possibly. Lando didn't do any type of long run, and Piastri did not even a full race run, and he had a lot of tire dag. So, but the car looked way better than it did the year before showing up at testing. I mean, that was a disaster last year. Yeah,
it was a disaster. Anything that McLaren did this year, anything McLaren did this year was better than 2023. Testing.
So, I mean, they're going to have to. There's a lot of development to be done there. Especially if they're going to have, if that's the tire dag that they might have. I mean, that was Piastri's, Achilles heel last year. So he struggled with tire dag last year as well. So, I mean, we'll see. We can't really get a total, like I said, total good feel because Lando never put a full run in. He never put a full race run in. So you don't know where the car's real race pace is at this point. And then is that also possibly a reliability concern? Maybe they noticed something and didn't do those longer runs because they have something else that they have to address before next weekend. So I'm going to put them at 4.
Which leaves us, sir, with 2 teams left. 2022, Ferrari finished in front of Mercedes. 2023, Mercedes finished only 3 points in front of Ferrari. Where are they finishing in 2024 based on your predictions, sir?
Well, from how everything looked, I'm going to put Merc at 3rd. The car looked a little bit more nervous in the rear end, something that they had an issue with last year. I think George Russell came out and said that he had, at some points he had trouble putting the car where he wanted to and going into the corners. So, that's a little bit of concern. But they had a little bit of a different front wing design. So maybe they might have to change directions on that because if drivers are saying that they're having a little bit of an issue putting the car where they want to. So those are a couple concerning things compared to, I'm going to roll right into it. The red team from Maranello. They had a brilliant test outside of Red Bull, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely.
The car looked so much more consistent. The rear looked stable. The 1 lap pace was there. They had really good race pace, really good long run pace. But that also comes from the car being more consistent and the rear being more stable. So hopefully they've addressed the major issue they had last year, which was tire drag. Because at some points during the season, they were, running races or right up there with Max, a couple seconds behind where most guys now follow during a race because just to have the less air disruption to your car and to save your tires a bit. But they always had to pit 3, 4, 5 laps before Red Bull because they had super high tire drag. So if they can address the tire drag, that's a major, major thing that Ferrari needed because the performance of the car was there.
Yeah,
but they're still probably, let's be honest. Nobody put their car in anger mode. Maybe some guys that maybe Haas did for some of their, lap times that they had put in. But let's be honest. Nobody in the top 5 put their car in anger mode. I think the best time was Leclerc at 1:30. That was 2-3 seconds off of the pole pace from last year. So once everybody puts their stuff in anger mode, it's going to be a little different. But the Ferrari's probably, I'll say it, 2-3 tenths, probably off Red Bull's pace.
Yeah, I mean the whatever they do, like the tire corrected pure pace, whatever they put out after the race. Some of these guys say it's about a half a second, maybe 0.4 of a second to half a second behind. It doesn't really matter. You want to put up a solid second this year and be competitive in case and if and when Max Verstappen and or Sergio Perez have technical difficulties and you are in a position that those to make a podium. You should be competing for a podium every single week. If you're Ferrari, second or third, it might not be first, but even then, Max Verstappen had an almost perfect season last year. You can't predict that happening again. Even in Max's best seasons before 2023, he still stumbled. There was still issues. There was still technical issues. You can still steal a lot of points and not make it this giant 400-point chasm between first and second that we had this year. And maybe having a Ferrari in second overall Ferrari driver, Charles Leclerc specifically, being ahead of Sergio Perez this year. I don't think that's going to happen. Statistically, it's probably not going to happen. But you got to be competitive and you got to come out serious every race because they will have a technical issue. 100%. Red Bull's going to have a technical issue. And Max Verstappen most likely isn't going to go another 24 races without having any issues. So, doubtful that's going to happen again. I'm going to leave it here. I'm going to echo what Enrico Cardelli said. The technical director for Ferrari, which is this is the most predictable car they've seen in many years. So again, it's coming from Ferrari, but I think we've seen that with our own eyes during testing.
Yes,
that this is a much more predictable car. I don't know if you would agree. Yes. It seems like you were in your concise evaluation of
the car's testing. Consistent. That's what you want. You want a consistent car.
You want it predictable. You want it to be drivable. It seems like the most drivable car they've had in many years. So we'll see if that translates into keeping up second and keeping distance between Mercedes and not looking at competing against Mercedes, but actually competing against Red Bull. And it's all about 2025 at this moment for Ferrari. Ferrari 25, get it up. Do your best this year, but it's all about next year with Lewis Hamilton and Ferrari. Thank you all so much for checking out this episode of In the Paddock F1 with Greeny and the Cheese. If you want to watch more or listen to the entire episode, the link is down below in the comments, or you can always check us out anywhere you find your podcast, In the Paddock F1 with Greeny and the Cheese. Thank you all for listening.